Welcome back to the channel. I'm Traben, and in today's video, we'll be looking at a review for Those We Drown by Amy Goldsmith. So Those We Drown is another one of the Barnes & Noble YA book club titles that I've been picking up. This one is one that rather surprised me with its subject matter. Those We Drown follows Liv, who has won a spot on the Eos, a cruise ship slash school of sorts. Like, she's doing a semester of college there, essentially. And she has won this spot because she finds out that someone else had mysteriously disappeared and she got the spot. Finds herself surrounded pretty quickly by a number of high-profile teens, influencers, and very wealthy individuals, whereas she does not come from a privileged family. Alienation, the feeling of being isolated, starts there and then escalates when her friend disappears and it becomes apparent that people are lying to her about what has happened to him and what is going on the ship. It begins as kind of a feeling of being othered in this setting on this cruise ship, turns into one of paranoia, where Liv has to figure out who to trust and figure out what the true purpose of the Eos is and why it has caused the disappearance of her friend. I read it amid a number of titles, YA book titles, many of them the Barnes & Noble Book of the Month, YA Book Club books that all were starting to feel very samey. We had a fantasy setting, we had a strong female protagonist with a love interest, we had kind of a child of destiny kind of plot going on, and someone coming into their power and vanquishing evil. And I picked up Those We Drown and wasn't quite sure, given the description on the back, exactly what direction it was going to take. It's fairly vague and it holds a lot back. Those We Drown is a horror book. It is a YA horror title, and one that I feel like benefits a lot from its rather unique premise, its setting, and visceral descriptions found within it. I feel like for a YA title, it's fairly violent, fairly graphic. Not that it's approaching anything close to extreme horror or anything like that, but it does feature many characters' deaths, rather intense descriptions of like bloated bodies and people drowning, people getting stabbed. And so I feel like a lot of my reaction to this book was just the shock of how different it was from the other YA titles I was reading at the time. I feel like the core of the story is very strong. It sets up a mystery of sorts where it's very clear from early on that there are a number of characters that are not to be trusted, are not being forthcoming with their knowledge of the situation, and the main character as an outsider having a difficult time not only acclimating to her surroundings, but also in trying to figure out who she can trust and who she can rely on. And I thought that was not only a fresh take on the fish out of water kind of trope, but also a good metaphor for teenagers and trying to find their identity. I feel as far as the plotting goes and the mystery of what's going on, this story does an excellent job of building up that mystique and ratcheting up that tension with a number of very creepy set pieces, moments that are full of tension that has a sense of ambiguity to it as well. So at the very beginning, we are not sure. It's unclear whether or not anything is happening at all, and whether the protagonist is perhaps reading into things more than she should be. But one of my complaints with the book is the protagonist, the main character, and her tendency to rationalize everything that's going on around her. So at some point, it becomes very obvious that there are certain characters who are lying. There are definitely things going on the ship. There are people who have nefarious motives, and our protagonist still tries to rationalize, tries to explain away these obviously like supernatural and horrifying events that are happening around her. Also, just generally didn't care for the main character. I felt like, in addition to this constant need to rationalize what was going on around her, she was very unlikable at the beginning of the story. And while it does get better as time goes on, there's never a point where I was really rooting for her. Obviously, I wanted to see her succeed because she was the protagonist of the story, but on a character level, on a personal level, there was nothing that I could attach myself to this character. And that might just be a case of my own background and my own experiences and just not finding anything that I could super relate to. But it was an issue that definitely affected my enjoyment of the overall story. In multiple parts of the story, the protagonist either trusts someone that we have a strong suspicion she should not trust, or doubts and is nervous around someone who has done nothing but support and try to help her. That being said, I do think it builds to a satisfying conclusion. It manages to thread together several clues that were occurring throughout the story in a satisfying way. It didn't feel cheap like some of the other modern horror that I've been reading recently, where like everything comes together perfectly and everything slides into place. It really did feel like the elements that were introduced early in the story had a clear purpose from the outset to reach the conclusion that we reached. Ultimately, I gave Those We Drown 4 out of 5 stars, largely for the mood and the plotting. I felt like were very strong. What held it back was the protagonist not being super likable, and also the focus on a lot of the focus on a lot of teen relationship and romance in a book that I feel like that didn't need to be included. Fantasy genre, I expect that, especially with YA, and it kind of works into that fairy tale feeling of boy meets girl and they end up happily ever after. But in a horror where the main narrative thrust is trying to survive and find out the answers to the mystery and get off the ship, I felt like it was really out of place and made the story feel a little disjointed, because those particular points where they were talking about relationships and talking about who was going to get with who, you knew that wasn't going to go anywhere. You knew that that wasn't going to conclude in any satisfying way. I think this is a solid read. If you're looking for a horror title that's a little bit different than your typical haunted house or ghosts or possession type story, I think this has some interesting ideas and offers an intriguing world, a very dark world, but one that's very captivating as well. As always, thanks for watching. If you've read Those We Drown, please leave your comments down below. Let me know what you thought of it. Help us grow this corner of our YouTube community. I hope your reading journey is going well. And until the next one, take care.